if tomorrow, let's say, our Prime Minister of India comes and asks me, Dushyant, now you have to roll eye screening program to every citizens in India, correct? How do you think about it? Correct. And then you start looking at things from a different perspective and kind of create this plan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new podcast called In Your Shoes. This podcast is for you to learn more about new people and professions from around the world. I would like to take you on a journey to understand the life and times of a new person every 2 weeks and get a chance to get into their shoes to learn what they do, why they do, and how they do it. Dushyantsinh Jadeja is one of my closest friends and has gladly accepted to join my podcast as the first guest. He, according to me, is an original thinker, great with people, and I'm so fortunate to have him on the podcast today. I call him by his family name Jadeja, and that's what I'm going to use it, calling him in this podcast. So, welcome to the podcast, Jadeja.
Thanks, Vivek.
For our podcast listeners, could you kindly share a little bit about yourself, like where you come from, what do you do for a living?
Sure. Uh, Thanks, Vivek. Excited to be on the podcast. So, my name is Dushyant. I am originally from a place called Jamnagar in Gujarat, India, and I've been living in Bangalore for almost 19 years. I came to Bangalore for my engineering or higher education, and since then I've been living here. Yeah.
Cool. And what brought you to Bangalore?
So I came to Bangalore for my higher education. I realized when I wanted to do an engineering, my home state didn't had many opportunities to pursue engineering. There were less number of colleges, and it was extremely competitive to get into one of those colleges. So I decided to kind of look at outside. And Bangalore being one of the Silicon City or Silicon Valley of India, I thought it would be good to experience technology firsthand if I come and do my higher education in Bangalore. So that was my main motivation for me to come here.
Yeah, I mean Bangalore attracts so many people around India, and I think it still retains its position as a Silicon Valley in India. And I know a lot of people would hate me to tell this, especially those who come from other parts of India, like Hyderabad.
True, there's always a healthy competition, but
Hmm.
I think Bangalore has its own charm, I would say.
Great to know that. So, for someone who does not understand what you work and where you work, could you just describe your profession, your job to them?
In my current role, I'm a program manager at Google Health in India, and my primary role is basically problem solving at a scale. In my current role, what I'm doing is that I'm trying to understand healthcare systems and understand what are the problems uh, that companies like mine or companies like my employer can solve it with their technology know-how. So so one of the problems that we are trying to address and there are tons of problems in and opportunities to be able to make an impact. And one area that we are focused on is preventing blindness, correct? Preventing avoidable blindness, to be specific. Uh, and we are trying to see how we can use our strength in technology to be able to provide uh, quality eye screening solution, which is both accessible and affordable to these hospitals. Now, so problem solving at scale sounds like really like the big buzzword, but in general, if you try to break it down, what it means is that understanding the problem, understanding the processes, and try to automate it. So that's what in simple term it looks like. So what I do is that I understand, okay, how do we prevent blindness is by catching patients early into the process. What is the current process look like? Understand the bottleneck and then try to see if you can find solution and automate this so it becomes a second nature, and we can kind of identify those high risk patients much early into the disease progression than at the very last stage where it is difficult for us to do anything there. So that's what I do.
Wow. So essentially, you are helping to solve the problem of blindness.
What I do is that I help doctors. I equip them with the right set of information, tools, and technologies, so they actually carry out this operations on the field.
Fantastic. That's so amazing. I'm guessing you feel so much excited being able to solve this great problem that still a lot of people have. And I think what you beautifully described is augmenting and providing information to doctors on the field to actually make decisions and actually fix the problem. So you're actually affecting lives and livelihoods of people. So that's so empowering. Can you also explain, maybe at a high level, what is your typical day looks like for someone who does not know really actually what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Um, So I live in, as I mentioned, I live in Bangalore, and Bangalore is like, apart from being the tech capital of the country, it is also popular for like, really uh, big traffic jams. So, so my commute is like, really, really far. So I usually start my day somewhere around like, 7:30 ish, and after getting ready, I I start my commute to office, and I spend quite a bit of time on the road. So I catch up on podcast. I try to get as much as email done as possible on my way to office, and also use this time to call my parents, because it's I have this personal OKR that I want to talk to my parents every day. So that's what I do in my commute time frame. From a work perspective, I think I divide my day into these three sections. I start my day with like understanding, are there any decisions to be made? Correct. From a work perspective, is the team stuck somewhere else? Do they need more clarity to or unblock them to be able to carry forward with their work? So I spend like almost an hour and a half understanding what decisions do I need to make today, and I start my day with that. Once we kind of know, I finish my section on decision making, then I start on the updates. I'd like to understand like what we have been doing from a work perspective, from a different hospital point of view. Let's say if I speak from, how are we doing there? Are there any anything interesting insight that is coming that we haven't seen it before, and stuff like that. So I like to get as much as updates possible. And the third and the last section of my day is the discussions. Now, this discussion could be on the meeting, verbal, email, text. So I'd like to kind of get into more of a discussion modes and get the ideas like going on. So let's say we are talking about how do we collect consent in a very effective way. Correct. So in consent collection process in healthcare is a pretty common, and we want to kind of see how we simplify this process. Or the other problem could be, how do we do referral adherence? And it's kind of many times in clinical environment you go and you get things done, but we there are also follow-ups. There are also follow-ups for that particular treatment or intervention, and many times patients don't follow it up. So how what do we do to kind of make this whole follow-up or referral adherence much more simpler and easier, so that the compliance rates are much higher. So try to get as much as idea as possible. So that's how kind of my day in the office looks like. And then again, long commute back home. I use this time again to like catch up on readings, a book that I'm kind of reading currently. uh, Once I'm back at home, I try to at least uh, you know walk or run for like in our complex. So I kind of focus some time on a personal fitness, spend some time with my family, and I kind of close my day by seeing if there are any evening meetings with our global teams, or just continue reading my book. So that's how my typical day look like.
Thank you for sharing that. I think I really liked your point about consent, and I think consent is really a cornerstone for privacy of data, and especially in healthcare, it's so important topic. Uh, and as you mentioned that you have been working to really solve the problem of blindness in your job as an employee and a person driving from Google Health. What made you pick this line of work? So the work of the domain itself and also the actual work that you do there. So what brought you to this profession?
That's very interesting question, Vivek. And okay, let me start with the first one, which is the role that I'm doing, which is about like program management or product management. Correct. Um, I I'd be lying that I would say that okay, program management was my calling since day one. No, that wasn't the case. I like many of the fresh engineering graduate. I joined a company and I wanted to become a software engineer. And I was part of the team which was building some amazing software. But early into my career, our team experienced or witnessed a reorg or reprioritization, and the team that I was part of it was severely impacted because of it. I have been given two options: one, find a job internally, or two, kind of look job outside. As simple as that. And so I started looking because I was very new into my career. I didn't have much information, so I started looking for a job internally, and then I found a job which was more of a partner management, and little I knew about, like, that I will be kind of building my career in the more of an external facing role rather than an internal facing role. The job was basically like using our company's platform and try to kind of strengthen a partner's solutions or offering. So basically it's as good as that, like you play an advisory role to a partner, understand their problems, look at the solution not just from the one lenses but from multiple lenses. Correct. Look at from a technology provider, look at from a customer perspective, look at from an compliance and the industry perspective. So there was a lot of learning involved in that particular, like, first 6 months. I was like, a lot of, like, under weather, but that pushed me to learn new things. So that's how I kind of to transition from a pure engineering to an partner or a program management role. And since then, I've been kind of always, I like that aspects of interacting with people, understanding the problem, and then kind of try to help them navigate that whole situation there. So that's how kind of moved into it. Since then, all my role has a good amount of external facing discussions or aspect that I've seen. So this is about program and product management side of it, and the health one was more of a personal thing. As I said, I'm originally from a different state, which is a Gujarat, and that's where my parents live. Uh, for most families in India, like my family also have a history of diabetes, and I was like really worried, when I first got to know. So, like, anybody who is working in a tech, and the thing that they could do things remotely. So I started kind of reading about how do I manage their disease remotely while being in Bangalore, and that kind of led me into so many different discussions, different projects. I volunteered in a lot of open source project, which was about disease management, like applications or solutions around it. I got to know a lot of doctors, through, and who wanted some technology help, but they didn't had, like much. And I was looking the other way around, where I had few tech jobs that I could land to be able to build that solution. And so we built bunch of solutions both internally at Google and outside. Um, Many of them failed, few succeeded, but that's what my calling for healthcare was. And I realized that how I would say disconnected and unorganized the healthcare sector in India is. I mean, we have come a long way. I mean, India's health system is probably at an inflection point, where they go with tons of transformation coming our way. But still, if you compare with let's say health systems and in other developed countries, I think we have a long way to catch. So just that realization was like aha moment for me, and then I saw that okay, if I can make at least a 1% impact in this whole industry, I'd be really happy. So it became more evident that health was something that I wanted to do, and that kind of led me into healthcare side of it.
That's very interesting to hear. What I really liked is that um, you moved from different roles,
Hmm.
and you also used your own personal experience and your
Hmm.
family um, as an inspiration to drive impact in this area. And I think a lot of people know that India is potentially, I think, the world capital for diabetes. And I think blindness is one of the horrific long-term implications of this disease if it's not controlled. And I think you made your life lessons and also your experiences as a mission for what you're doing, which is very extraordinary and also inspiring for me. And I hope all the people who are listening to this podcast. So thank you for sharing that. We want to now also go into more funnier aspects of your role. When I say funny, it's also like quirky.
Everybody in my team thinks my job is funny, so you don't have to tell me. No, sorry, I just thought, but that's an interesting one.
What would you like people to know about this profession um, that they may not know at this point in time, or they may not have the experience to know about it?
So I think program or product management is in my view, is I think the most highly, I would say, misrepresented designation across the industry. It means different to different teams, different companies. So I have worked in a three or four companies so far. And to give you an example, in my first company when I was working there, the program management job ladder had a very different responsibilities and the traits, and the same role in Google has a very different responsibility and traits. And I'm pretty sure this is not. And if you go to another organization, it could be has a variant of this particular role. So the one thing what I'm trying to say is that it is not a template role like an engineer, or like a sales or somebody else. Correct? The role has a lot of dynamic. I mean, it's very fluid and also dynamic. And so if you are getting into product or program management role, my recommendation is that talk to your immediate team members, understand what they're doing, understand what is their expectation from the role or from the person that is joining the role out of it, and then do an honest evaluation or self-assessment that okay, is this something what you want to do? Because whether you like it or not, they are going to expect things from you. So it's super important for me. So that's the one thing. The Yeah, I think to me that was the biggest, I would say, misconception people have about program and product management roles.
That's pretty interesting. I have also kind of heard the same in my workplace and the companies I had worked with. Do you also have like any stereotypes that other people think about this particular role?
Oh, absolutely. I think there are many. I mean, I can tell my own stereotype. Like when I when I got into the role, I was thinking like this is the role which is probably the second in terms of an authority and power. It is the second most important role after CEO. In no time, I realized no, that was the wrong thing. This role is I mean, you're never in a driving seat. A program manager or product manager is a facilitator. Correct. The job is to help people, find solution, unblock them wherever possible, or take the things that they're not able to do, and be able to find solution to that. Your job is to keep the engine running and do whatever it possible to do it. So to me, that's how I look at my role, and that's how I've seen not just me but everybody, at least in different org, a program, a product manager, some amount of that facilitation is kind of really important there. So if you're thinking, okay, and again, this is again from different company to company. Some company which are very heavy engineering driven culture, where engineers have much more control and they are in driving seat. There are some companies where their let's say marketing team is more in driving seat out of it. So again, depends on your company's culture and value. But no matter what, in whichever companies or which culture you go, program or product management role is mostly a facilitator role.
Okay, that's really good to know. Uh, so Jadeja, this podcast may reach people of all ages, all backgrounds and experiences. And if some of them really want to get into this, um, how do they start? Like, what should they study? What experiences do you think they should have in order to be able to do what you do?
Mm. First of all, I hope more people take this particular role and as a career option. I think I mean globally, if you look at, like, there is like a huge demand for somebody somebody who can kind of take this particular as a career option and drive it. And as we kind of see, as the industry grows, I think there'll be more need for such roles outside. That's how I'd like to think so. What does it need from an education perspective? I think I wouldn't want to kind of generalize here, but people from any background can become a good programmer, product manager, as long as they're open. Correct? They're open to learn new things. They're willing to kind of be able to learn quick, learn kind of fast, adapt quickly. So being open and be able to kind of uh, do kind of learning on their own is kind of super important for this. If you have a tech background, it helps, but if you don't have a tech background, it's fine. I think people can learn on their own out of it. From a skills perspective, I've seen I usually get involved in system design discussions. I get involved into product launches. I get involved into some of the legal aspects of it, and kind of sometimes uh, what are the messaging when you launch a product. So it has a, like, multifaceted role. So somebody who kind of enjoys being this multidisciplinary role, I think that would be a wonderful fit for them. um, I know you can't really start by, like, okay, I want to become multidisciplinary, but you need to grab the opportunities if you have with both hands whenever you are presented with that opportunity. I'll give an example. Like, um, I realize that in my day job, I don't have much opportunities to be able to build this different skill set. So what I was doing is that, and in fact, you were there in one of so many of those discussion as well, Vivek. Like, I pushed myself to take part in hackathons, and any opportunities outside work. I used to go to meetups and workshops and try to connect with people, learn from them. I was part of one of those hackathon discussion where my whole knowledge about UX kind of started from there. Before that particular incident, my knowledge about UX was that it's somebody who has a good skills on Photoshop and does some nice looking graphics. That's how I used to think of it as a user experience. But when I met two gentlemen, I think one is Rana and the other one is Archana, and I think they kind of really opened my eyes, like, oh wow, this can be a field, like, really. Same thing goes with the legal. One of the persons that I met in the conference, and he was trying to help startups on a financial side of it. And then we were just kind of talking about it. How does the financial landscape across the globe look like, and he explained me how important it is to have like legal aspects and the compliance and regulatory aspects into it. So it's interesting. I mean, if you have an opportunity to kind of build those skills, just grab with both hands. Don't just confine yourself into one thing. And B, if you don't have an opportunity, and if you really want to kind of take this as a great option, or even general, I'd recommend just participating in hackathons and in workshops, or kind of just going attending meetups and meeting different people with a diverse background would helpful. And the last thing, experiment. Correct. I mean, the knowledge that you have acquired will only be useful if you try and put them into use. So for longest period of time, I used to do this. Like every weekend, I used to take one problem and then try to solve. Like for example, if tomorrow, let's say, our Prime Minister of India comes and asks me, Dushyant, now you have to roll eye screening program to every citizens in India. Correct? How do you think about it? Correct? And then you start looking at things from a different perspective and kind of create this plan. I know you don't really get to put them into practice, so there's still a gap there, but at least it orients your thought process. It kind of it makes you think from a program or product manager perspective to be able to kind of apply those skill set.
That's actually very enlightening. I really liked the last part of what you mentioned is like having thought experiments. And I think when I
Hmm.
was reading about Albert Einstein, another great scientist, I think they enjoyed this idea of imagining scenarios and visualizing them in their head. And I think that was a approach they used to solve problems and visualize how the solution would look like. And I think putting yourself in such positions, whether it's participation in events like you mentioned, about hackathons and meetups, or just imagining scenarios where you are there and you have a certain thing to deliver as a responsibility, how would you do so? I think these are great exercises one can do to really expand their knowledge. And I hope people who are listening to this podcast can use that as an inspiration and ideas to get themselves into this role. Um, and I think what you just shared with all of us is a really remarkable journey that you have. Um, and I think it was very useful for me. And I think it's also useful for everyone who is listening today. So thank you so much, Jadeja. I think this has been a very enlightening session and a enlightening first session of many to come. And I hope more chances to talk about other things, to have our listeners really understand different aspects of you and your work. So I want to just have a last question about if people would like to reach out to you, maybe as a follow-up or have a question to ask based upon what they hear in this podcast, what is the best way they can get to you?
Sure, I'd love to kind of help wherever possible. I'm kind of I would say moderately active on Twitter, so I think Twitter would be the best platform. Or or they can send me an email as well. But I want to be mindful that um, my email replies are like really slow. So if I don't reply you on time, it's not that because I don't want to reply. It's just that I have something else which is taking my time, which is more priority. But otherwise, Twitter kind of makes things much more simpler. The replies are much more smaller and crisp. So Twitter is my ideal. If not, you can send me an email at jadeja.dushyantsi@gmail.com. And happy to help.
Thank you. So I will have your email as well as your Twitter handle in the notes so that if anybody is interested can reach out to you. Thank you so much, Jadeja. I think it was a really great experience for me to bring you on the podcast, and I hope we get to have more conversation on this podcast's future episodes very soon.
Absolutely, and I look forward to the more episodes. And thank you for having me, Vivek. Appreciate.
Thank you for joining this podcast. I hope this was useful and you learned a lot. For more such great podcasts, please do not forget to subscribe to the podcast channel In Your Shoes on SoundCloud, Spotify, and Apple Music. New podcasts are uploaded every 2 weeks. Goodbye.